Hi, my name is Erin Parsons. I'm a makeup artist. So in this video, we are going to recreate makeup from the 1800s. Now, because this was the Victorian era, makeup recipes were not easy to find. This was literally the clean girl era of its time. Queen Victoria had declared makeup to be impolite. Queen Victoria set the tone. Hair was pulled back and perfectly coiffed. Skin was totally scrubbed clean, absolutely no makeup. The Victorians were really obsessed with cleanliness, but by the end of the 1800s, closer to the reign of King Edward, this is when we see a new trend emerge, the Gibson girl. And in photos of these beauties, I can start to see a little bit of makeup here. As a matter of fact, the word makeup itself may have been coined during this time. This was 1897, and Margaret Cunliffe Owen wrote this about makeup. Put my glasses on so I can read you the passage. It is very much against my inclinations to write about a practice of which I thoroughly disapprove. But as a great many society women have adopted the custom of making up, or to speak more plainly, of painting their faces, I do believe this is the first time we ever see the word makeup, all the way back in 1897 when makeup was not so common. The reason why they disapproved of makeup so much, because if you could tell you had painted your face, you were considered someone of low morals, aka a prostitute, or an actress. They were, of course, known to paint their faces for stage and theater, but then it started to become a bit more common during streetwear. But definitely, if you could actually see that the face was painted, no high society woman would be caught wearing rouge. So let's get back to the Gibson girl, because although I can see there may be some makeup in these photos, they are in black and white. So what did the makeup actually look like? What was the color of the makeup? Well, we're about to find out. I have these two books. This one is from 1890, and this one is from 1901. Now, in both of these, there are a lot of recipes for skincare, hair care, hygiene, dental hygiene, soaps. It's really difficult to find the cosmetic recipes. They're sort of hidden, but I did find a few formulas. These are not toxic, but the ingredients that are in them are questionable. Some of them we do not use any longer. So I'm going to make 3 recipes today: an eyeshadow, a rouge, and a lip pomade. And 2 of these 3 recipes are most definitely not vegan. So let me get into a couple of those ingredients. First ingredient is carmine. Now, carmine is still used today. This is basically a cochineal insect. It's a parasite that lives on cacti, and it produces the most beautiful red color when turned into a lake dye. Now, this has been used for thousands of years, and it goes back to the Aztecs. And if you're worried about this being on your lips, you should probably be more worried about it being in your food, because this is actually known as a very common food coloring. It's often in yogurt, or maybe you remember the sort of Starbucks scandal with their, I think it was a pink frappuccino. That would be cochineal insect. But it is totally natural, and it is harmful to the bugs, not harmful to humans. So I am going to use it in one of the recipes, because I really do want to make these as spot on as possible so we can see what they actually looked like. What was the texture, the pigment, the opacity? I want to know it all. Okay, the next ingredient is sperm oil. Sperm oil is from a sperm whale, aka spermaceti. So it's basically a waxy substance that comes from the head of the whale. And this was often used in candles and ointments. It's found in a lot of skincare recipes from those times. It's actually been used since the 17th century, but it was banned in 1976. Whaling in general and internationally was banned in 1987. So the sale of sperm oil is no longer legally allowed. With that said, me and my vintage collecting, I did find a bottle on eBay, and it still has liquid inside. I'm going to use it because I just want these recipes to be as exact as possible. If you want to make this same recipe, you can take out the sperm oil ingredient and instead use jojoba oil. And that is a very similar consistency, and that will work just fine. But again, I just want to keep it as authentic as possible. So before I show you the first recipe, I do want to point out I'm wearing a modern makeup look, and I want to try these products in a modern way. I've even worn a color that really washes me out. I feel so pale in this yellow color, but with rouge, that's gonna help. So I really wanted to put it to the test. Okay, let's get into the very first recipe, and this one is for eyeshadow. We are going to make eyeshadow using walnut leaves. So this recipe is quite simple. You actually just make a decoction of concentrated walnut leaves. What a decoction is, basically you just boil water to get the essence of whatever the product is, in this case walnut leaves. Now it mentions that this decoction gives them a beautiful bistre tint. So I had to look up the definition of this word, and it's pronounced bistre. It's a brownish yellowish pigment made from the soot of burned wood. First we need the walnut leaves, and we need a hot plate, or if you have a stove, and a pan. Fill it with water, and we're going to add the walnut leaves, and we're just basically going to boil this down. I think this boiled about an hour. Took the leaves out and strained them, squeezed out any of the juice so we could keep as much of it as possible, and then we put it back in the pan, and we just basically keep boiling to thicken the product. I thought if it was too watery it wouldn't make a good eyeshadow, so I went a bit thicker, but if you go too thick, you can simply add water back in and make the product a bit more liquidy. Now they do mention using a brush, and I've read a lot about camel hair brushes during this time. I even have this picture that's very famous from the 17th century featuring a small rouge brush made from some sort of hair, camel hair, I don't know, but they are called camel hair brushes. Okay, we're gonna try this on. This is the walnut leaf. It's basically like a liquid. It smells so good. I mean, it smells like walnut leaves. It's very herbal. It almost looks like a syrup, but not so thick, not so viscous. Okay, I'm gonna use a natural hair brush, something sort of thin. I'm a little bit nervous, but we're gonna try it on. Just a tiny dip of it, and I've put a little bit on the back of my hand because I don't want to apply too much. It is meant to look pretty natural. Now, because I'm not going to do this fully Victorian right now, I'm going to go ahead and apply it a little higher. It's kind of sticky. I'm going to take a little bit of water on my hand with a brush, and I'm just going to lightly go over the edges to soften that, because I think it is meant to be more like a stain. So you definitely do not need a lot. That color is amazing though. So it's definitely hard to apply around eyeliner, which makes sense because they wouldn't have had eyeliner like this back then, but look at the tone that it gives. It makes sense, that bistre tint now I see. See what I mean? It kind of goes on heavy. I'm gonna go back in again with a little bit of water. Also during the Victorian era, I'm sure they wouldn't bring it all the way up to the brow. It probably would have just stayed on the lid. So I'm gonna try to soften out the edges. Off camera, I just want to give this a fair shot because it was a little difficult to use, but because I am wearing so much makeup around it, I added in a little bit of concealer under the brow just so we could get a little bit of an ombre effect. And I have to say, the color is stunning. And if you want to do an eyeshadow that no one would detect, this really would work. I want to do a swatch because I found it a little bit hard to use with a brush. So maybe when I do the full Victorian look, I should just use my fingers. You see what I mean? If you just use it, like you'll just get a tint and then it dries down, and it does keep a little bit of the sheen. It doesn't stain because I was able to wipe it off of my hand before, but it just leaves really a sheer tint. There is something to this. I just have to get better with using it. Okay, let's go on to the next recipe, and that is for a dry rouge. Now rouge, of course, we call blush nowadays. And this was quite a common product even then, although it was usually very undetectable. So you had liquid rouge, you had cream rouge, and you also had a dry rouge, and that's what we're gonna make today. I've also found that liquid and cream rouges are a little bit more tricky to apply, whereas a dry rouge is much easier. So I think this may have been even more common. So this recipe is for a fine, dry French rouge. So we're going to use carmine, which of course we talked about before, the cochineal insect. That is what this looks like. It's such an amazing red pigment. We're also going to use oil of almonds, almond oil, and French chalk, which was also quite common as a face powder during those times, but it is purely white. Now the way that the ingredients are listed, it's a half dram, 1 dram, and 2 ounces. So we're like, what the heck is a dram? We figured it out and we came up with grams. So we put the recipe right here: 1.7 grams of carmine, 3.4 grams of almond oil, and 56 grams of the French chalk. Basically, we're just gonna put it in, and using a mortar and pestle, we're going to go ahead and grind everything together. And once you start to see it grind together, you get this incredibly gorgeous pink shade. It probably takes in total 15 minutes to make. And the ingredients are pretty easy to find. I found all of these on Amazon. The carmine I get from TKB. I will list everything below so it would make it easy for you guys, because I would love to see you recreate these recipes. So I've tried to show this in different lighting because it's a little hard to see how vibrant the color is, but I have it here. Look at the intense pink. I'm so excited to use this. I cannot wait to get this on my face because I look so washed out right now. I am going to use a natural bristle powder brush or blush brush, and this is sort of the size that they would have used back then. Now you can also use a rouge paw. Rouge paw is like a hare's foot, a rabbit's foot, which seems very creepy, but I do actually have a vintage hair foot from the 1900s that I found in an old stage and theater box. I'm also going to explain later how they would have applied it and where they would have applied it, but for this, again, we're going to try it as a modern makeup. So I'm really just going to mainly put it on my cheeks, and I really love blush, so I might go ham on this. I could probably scent some things like this, like with a rose oil, but it doesn't have a particular smell. I don't know, it almost just smells like a crayon or something. So, okay, we're gonna go ahead and dip in. Woo! I don't wanna take too much. Oh my gosh. Wow. That is so perfect. It is literally the color that I am constantly searching for. Look how beautiful that is. I could see that looking extremely natural. I think when people flush naturally, like if you come out from the cold or someone who just has a naturally pink cheek, it tends to go sort of downward and then on the apple. I love this. And you know what? I have a giant bowl that's gonna last me literally for the rest of my life. Let's get a little more on the brush. Tap off a little bit. That is so stunning. I cannot get over it. I'm gonna go a little bit downward and then up onto the cheekbone. Do you see how soft that is though? Is that soft to me because I love wearing lots of blush? I always like to do a little bit on my nose and a little on my chin. Anytime I do blush, I usually take like a powder on top and I just soften out the edges. Okay, if I haven't made it abundantly clear, this is the blush of my dreams. I love this. Now, you may not be so into this because it is not vegan using the carmine, but the color is what I dream of. I love it. I love it. Now we are moving on to lip rouge or a lip pomade. While powder and cheek rouge was somewhat becoming accepted, people were very against putting lip rouge on, or really any product on the lip. There's a lot of clear lip pomades from back then, just things that could moisturize, or they talk about putting cold cream on the lips. There were also mentions of women walking into a room and biting their lip to bring color, but then they said, you know, don't do this because this basically will just injure your skin, and don't lick the lips because in the end it'll just make it more dry. So it's very interesting how particular they were about what you put on your lips. I did happen to find this lip rouge recipe, and this is the recipe that, it's again not vegan. This one has carmine, this one has the spermaceti, but this one, there's no beeswax in this one. So if you were to change out both of those ingredients, again, the spermaceti use jojoba oil, and carmine, you could instead use a red lake dye. So you could make this into a vegan version, but we are staying true to the recipe. Okay, for our lip rouge, we have 3 ounces of almond oil. We have 155 grams of white wax, and this is like paraffin wax, so you can use it like what they do with manicures when they dip your hand in that hot bath. It has a bit of a perfume scent to it, so I would highly recommend to look for unscented. We're going to do 77 grams of the spermaceti and 155 grams of rose water. Now you're going to dissolve the wax first over a slow fire and add the oil drop by drop, mixing well, as the recipe says to do. So you can color this with carmine, and I started with very little, and then I just kept adding more until I found a color that I thought was good, because it was almost still colorless, even with a lot of carmine. So I just kept adding it in and sort of eyeing it and testing it on my hand until I found the right color. Now it says that the pomade should be preserved in little pots, carefully stoppered, because of course something like this could go bad, I'm sure, for, you know, it wouldn't last very long if you don't have preservatives in a product. I have the product right here. It's inside this beaker. Now it does mention a brush or anything. I'm assuming they probably just put it on with their fingertips. So I'm gonna scrape a little bit of it out. Oh my God, that's kind of a lot. Look how pigmented it is. If you spread it out though, it really does become extremely sheer. Almost like a lip gloss. Okay, let's just go ahead and put it on. Oh, that is freaking gorgeous. It just shows how far you can go with it. Obviously, when we do the natural look, I won't do it this intense, but I just want to try it as much as I can put on. That is so freaking pretty. I think the spermaceti is kind of gross. This almost tastes like it's like a hamburger with perfume on top of it. I'm just gonna blot the lips. I wanna see what it does. Now you've taken the shine away. Now you can start to feel a real lip. Okay, I have to say all of that worked so much better than I even expected or could hope for. It is so pretty. And now, of course, we have to do it the real Victorian way. I've got to get rid of these skinny brows because that definitely wasn't popular until probably the 1930s. No more lip liner, no more eyeliner, no more false lashes, and certainly not foundation. We want no freckles, perfect skin, or we'll be snubbed in society. So I'm going to come back in my full Victorian gear and we're going to do a completely real 1800s clean girl look. So I'm currently in a 1901 Edwardian walking suit, and I went as realistic as possible with my Gibson Girl cottage loaf hairstyle. This was hell to get together, but it looks pretty realistic, so I'm proud of it. And another thing is, now I shave my eyebrows off to draw them pencil thin, so I had to use eyebrow wigs. And they look really natural. I'm super impressed with them, so eyebrow wigs are on. Now, another thing you're gonna notice is that my face is beaming with shine. One of the ways that they would use makeup when they would lay down their powder is they would apply cold cream. So I'm fully greased up. And what else you're gonna notice, I have freckles and I have blemishes. And normally when I film, I really pack on the makeup because it looks good for camera. But now this is my real skin. What a day to have some blemishes, because in the Victorian era, if you had freckles and pimples, you were shunned by society. So we need to cover this up. So I'm going to read you a passage from a book from that time, and they do talk about how much they detested painted faces. So we're going to keep this as natural as possible, and I'm going to use pearl powder. It was a very common cosmetic ingredient that women would use to powder their faces. Now, the way I'm going to apply it, they say to apply with a puff. That puff would be swan's down. Obviously, this would not go well today, and you can buy them vintage. It was pretty common up until the 1930s. And the second way you would apply it is with a chamois, which is sheepskin. A lot of non-vegan stuff here, but I do want to try it in the way that they would have applied it. You can actually create your own pearl powder at home. It takes quite a lot of work, mortar and pestle, grinding. For my pearl powder, I'm cheating a little bit because there's a company called LBCC Historical. They sell on Etsy. I believe their name is Little Bits. They make products literally from the 1800s, and this is a pearl powder I've used before. It's fantastic. Basically is a pure white powder. Now, I'll also say that they were sort of against pure white on the faces, but this pearl powder is so sheer, it doesn't really lay any color, so it's pretty translucent. But they talk about violet powders, pink powders, Rachel, which is a color that was more of a yellow, more natural tone, and even some deeper tones. And the very first really deep complexion powders to come out launched in 1905 from Overton, which I have some of those. But for now, we're going to go in with the pearl powder, and I'm going to read you this passage while I apply. According to a book called Beauty and How to Keep It, published in 1889, the use of rouge and pearl powder seems to have become more fashionable now than it has been for many years. Whether it is the result of the severe winters we have or the late hours we keep, I do not know. I have seen girls who are certainly not more than 17 or 18 with their faces painted and very badly done into the bargain. It would be so much better to try to correct the faults of the face with a little care and art without covering the whole of it with a mask of paint. I had to pull you in a little closer because I feel there must be a better way to apply this powder. I think the powder itself is really nice because once it sets in, it gives this beautiful velvet finish, and it really does fill in your pores. However, it can get a little patchy because on top of cold cream that's so greasy, it really stuck to it. So maybe something less greasy would work better. But this is the final skin. Now I want to get into the eyebrows. So I have here a clove, and when you burn a clove, you can use it as an eyebrow pencil. So we're going to give it a little light, playing with fire. and you just burn the tip a little bit. And we're gonna try this in the eyebrows, if you can see them. Pretty undetectable, right? Let's see how this draws. Oh, that's a good color. I think that's gonna make a really good eyebrow pencil. Now, when it comes to eyebrows, the Victorians talk about making them groomed, even tweezing out hairs. You don't want them too thick, but you certainly don't want them too thin. However, you could fill them in a little bit darker, and this goes back to the Georgian era, so it was pretty common to use cloves, burnt cloves. And while I apply this, I'm going to read to you another passage I found. I'm not an advocate of indiscriminate painting of the face, of hair dyeing or bleaching, because all are usually unpleasant and perceptibly artificial and unbecoming in their results. But I certainly think a woman should be her own judge in the matter, and the subject is one she is entirely competent to study for herself without masculine interference or dictation. Moreover, I never knew a woman who, if she chose, could not deceive the keenest eye of a man on this point. It is always another woman who first tells a man that her sister uses artificial color or stains her hair. Well, let's get a close-up of these amazing eyebrows. I will say that not having natural brows, I noticed the clove was sticking to the lace and the glue, so I think it would maybe be even softer. If someone out there tries it, just go to the grocery store and buy cloves and burn them right at the tip, and you can try this and let me know. But they don't look bad. It's like kind of cute. It's working. And if you look at the Edwardian girls, the eyebrows were a little bit darkened. Now that we have the eyebrows on, we have the powder, we have to go back to our walnut leaf eyeshadow from yesterday. And now that I don't have any eyeliner on, I feel I can do a better job of this. Now again, I mentioned last time to use a camel hair brush with this product. I'm going to try again, but I think this time I can go in with my fingertips, especially because I'm not wearing false nails or anything. So we're gonna try it out. This one was kind of tough, but it looked beautiful in the end. Okay, I shall read you another passage. There is a conventional type of fictitious beauty to be avoided. From the rims of her bekolbed eyes to the tips of her tomato-stained fingers, she is artificial. No doubt she is as wise as a serpent in recipes for balms, rouge, and dyes, and in mysteries of puff and plumper. She is neither rare nor inaccessible, and her skillful tactics and meretricious methods are open secrets. That is the eyeshadow on. Is it imperceptible? What do you think? Okay, now for the eyelashes. This is an ancient beauty secret. You can literally take a candle and burn onto a pan or like a porcelain dish, and you can make a soot from it. So that's exactly what we're doing here. Then you just scrape it off, and now you have your product for mascara. Back then, you could probably use a toothbrush, or there was something called mascara that was used on men's, like their facial hair, and they would have these little sort of toothbrushes. I'm going to use something modern, but it's very similar. Making up, except when it is done in a very discreet and thoroughly artistic fashion, stamps the most honest woman at least as fast, and this ought certainly to be sufficient to deter the fair sex from indulgence in so unladylike a practice. But they said something else very interesting. You can actually take a hairpin and use this same soot and apply an eyeliner. Do we lick the pin first? Oh, that is interesting. Oh, that is actually working. That's nice. Okay, now onto the rouge, which you've already seen the recipe for. We're going to use that same product, but should we apply it with a hare's foot? So I had always wondered what the heck was a rouge paw. I would read this word a lot in stage and theater books, and then one time I bought this old theater box from a performer's makeup kit, and inside of it was this rouge paw. I linked back the products to a date. It was 1901 that the case was from. We're definitely not going to use this, but we're gonna go ahead and use the camel hair brush and do it like we did yesterday. However, this time, I'm going to apply the rouge the same way a Victorian lady would do. You would do, of course, your cheeks, the nostrils, the chin, and the ears. When rouge is used, it ought to be of the very best quality and of the palest rose tint. The common and cheaper kinds will ruin the skin in a very short time, as they are composed of inferior carmine. An easy way of painting the face is to put on a layer of cold cream, after which rub in a very little carmine powder. The worst of using rouge is that one never knows when to stop. This is almost the final part. The lip rouge, which I showed you the recipe yesterday. This time I'm just gonna go in with my fingertip and let's see what happens, and then I will blot it and read you something else. There is no falsehood in it. We do not expect our dearest foes to expose their weaknesses. A woman who is indifferent regarding her own appearance cannot hope to preserve the admiration of her husband. On these points a man loves to be deceived, and he is right. What is life? What is love without illusion? Oh, it's taking everything in me to not want to put this over my top lip and overline like crazy, but here we are with our rosebud lips. I'm gonna give it a blot. Oh, that's really pretty. That's undetectable, I think, and that's very easy to apply. This could technically also be used on the cheeks, and I think that would make a really pretty rouge. Now, in the first part of the video, when I tried this on, I could really taste like a perfume hamburger, which is really gross, and I'm sure it's because of the sperm oil. But when I blot it and I wore it yesterday, I had no scent and no taste on the lips. It was also really quite moisturizing, so this is definitely a good product. Of course, use jojoba oil. I think we're gonna do just one final thing. Now, a while back, I made a recipe for veins. I'm gonna show you that recipe here. It's extremely simple, 3 ingredients, very similar to the rouge. I have that product right here, and as you can see, it's pretty dried up at this point. So I'm just gonna add a drop of oil, and I'm gonna use the stick and apply a little vein near my eye, because if you had little see-through veins, it meant you were wearing no makeup at all. Annie Wolf warned that outlining the veins should be attempted only by the experienced. The practice of shading and accentuating the bosom, she wrote primly, though often indulged in, is to my mind neither necessary nor a nice one. So that is the final look, and I have to say, that was not easy. I really feel for some of these women who are trying to get away with doing very natural makeup without perfect skin. I really would have loved to seen someone put their makeup on at that time, because this was quite difficult. To be honest, I didn't get anything to really blend perfectly. I will say the eyeshadow, I could do that on a daily basis. It's really pretty, it's simple, and everything worked. Loved the lip color, and I love this blush color. But personally, I want to put it on really heavy on top of a full coverage foundation like I had it on yesterday. I would wear this every day. I absolutely love it. So of course, other than daytime, you wouldn't have had these crazy bright lights. You would have been under candlelight, or even the electricity in the light bulbs back then, it would have been quite dim and quite yellow. So let's do a test. I'm going to put this under candlelight. Now to me, I think we could get away with this. You see a little bit of color and rouge. The veins really stand out. So definitely go easy on the veins. That wasn't so necessary, but it does still look natural. Even the brows are not so much. It's quite nice, I have to say. I do prefer my full face, but what do you think? Clean Girl, 1800s? I'm going to read one more passage for you, because finally we have The Defense of Cosmetics. This was published in 1896. For behold, the Victorian era comes to its end. The old signs are here, and the portents to warn the seer of life that we are ripe for a new epoch of artifice. Are not men rattling the dice box and ladies dipping their fingers in the rouge pot? No longer is a lady of fashion blamed if to escape the outrageous persecution of time she fly for sanctuary to the toilet table. And if a damsel prying in her mirror, be sure that with brush and pigment she can trick herself into more charm. We are not angry. Indeed, why should we ever have been? One thing I've been noticing since I put that cold cream on, my skin keeps getting very shiny, so I have to constantly touch up with the powder. But how does one do so on the sly? Because obviously you don't want anyone to know you're painting your face. Well, you could hide it in a walnut. Now, this is the most bizarre thing, but look inside. On this side, you have a sewing kit, but underneath, inside there is your powder puff. Your tiny, inconspicuous powder puff. Just go to the bathroom, no one's ever gonna know. And you would just hang that on your chatelaine. Thank you so much for watching. That was so much fun. I love exploring beauty history. And if any of you try out any of these recipes, please let me know how they worked.